Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1 password. Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSync's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman. This segment is sponsored by Okta. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Okta. Shiven Ramji is the president, customer identity at Okta, where he is responsible for the customer identity cloud product, data, security, and technology strategy, and execution. He believes in empowering developers as they are the new creators, decision makers, tastemakers, and kingmakers. Before joining Okta through the acquisition of Auth0, Shiv served as the Senior Vice President of Product at DigitalOcean, where he led DigitalOcean's products, pricing, and partnerships. Additionally, Shiv has held leadership positions at global brands including Amazon, NBC Universal, and the Nielsen Company. Shiv, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk about customer identity and kind of the impact of AI on customer identity. But before we get into the AI portion of this, let's kind of just level set from a customer identity perspective, more around what's the difference when it comes to identity and access management of your employees versus your customers, right? There are some differences there, aren't there?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the easiest way to think about the differences is that let's start with like just the sign up experience, right? So if you're an employee, usually your system of record is the your HR system, and so when you're giving access to internal employees, like there's been some verification already done in advance. So things like somebody's looked at your employment, if there's done employment checks on you, they've seen that you're legally in the country and are okay to be employed by the employer, and so on and so forth. So you already know a lot about the user. But when it comes to customer identity, you actually don't know, right? Because all of us are consumers, right? A brand or a retailer or a subscription product has no idea who's going to be signing up for their product. So identities are not known, and they need to be provisioned just in time, or need to be provisioned on demand, right? So that's like one big difference. Another key difference tends to be, from an employee access perspective, you can add a lot of friction. So for example, we're all logging into applications at our work, and if your security team decided, you know what, you need to re-authenticate and you need to re-verify who you are, let's say twice a day or even more than that, it is the security team's choice. And yeah, as an employee, you might get frustrated, but you might deal with that frustration more readily. It's your job. You're like, fine, I'll log in 2-3 times a day. Now, you can't have that in a consumer scenario. Think about all of us, right? Imagine we logged into an app and then literally it asks you to log in again and then again and again. So if you're like consuming news or if you're doing a workout on your app, that sort of friction is not helpful, and consumers are very picky, right? So they won't use your product. So the level of friction tends to be very, very different. And then the last thing I would say when it comes to things like security, the attack surface area from a customer identity standpoint is pretty significant. You will have this large scripted bot attacks. You are always out on the open internet, and anybody can script malicious attacks at scale, at your infrastructure, and really affect your customers, right? And so things like account takeovers or breached passwords that are out on the dark web, somebody can take over your identity. Those types of attack surface here do not exist in a sort of a workforce or employee scenario. There are different attack types. It's usually phishing attempts and stuff like that, social engineering. And so even the attack surface frequency and scale from a security standpoint tend to be very different between these two products, or two markets rather.
Yeah. And that's interesting. All that complexity before we even talk about the AI impact of protecting those environments. As a consumer, right? Like, I know this, right? Log in, two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Remember this device so you don't have to do it for the next 30 days, right? That's what you mean by the friction part, right? You don't want to have to necessarily do this multiple times.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about AI's impact now on identity and applications, right? Because I think the challenge now is you've got a large attack surface because you're publicly open, because you have consumers that can come in anywhere, which means you're wide open to probably one, bots for sure, but also malicious folks. How is AI starting to impact the external attack surface for applications that need to authenticate customer identities?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it is, first, it's like existing threats that we have, right? With AI, existing threats are that much more easier and faster and cheaper to execute. So, if you look at the threat landscape, there are already so many vulnerabilities today, and attack patterns that exist. With AI, malicious actors can do them much, much faster, cheaper, and at much significant scale. So just take the exact existing threat landscape. The barriers to executing that are significantly lowered. So that's one. Then so that's one, like existing threats just done at massive scale. Then there is the trend of like, well, there are additional threats now that are being introduced. So if you think of things like, we already know, like, from how good these AI tools are getting at like impersonating users, whether it's through video. You can create these deep fake videos. We've certainly seen cloning your voice is super easy. There's so many tools out there that can clone my voice and can be used in very malicious ways. So there are these like new ways to like really trick humans into believing that I'm addressing somebody, I'm sending somebody a video to do something, or it could be that I'm sending a voice message and it will sound very identical to me. So like, how do you differentiate that this is truly authentically coming from me and not a malicious actor? And then I think we also have new uh, threats we have to think about. And the best one to think about here is like, now all these AI models and chatbots and agents are taking so much information from our systems and from our apps, and our profile information. How do you ensure that the AI model is accessing the data that they are supposed to access on your behalf? And so this concept of like finer grained permissioning becomes really, really important. And all of us just look at our behavior day to day. We are interacting with so many different applications, doing so many different things. And how do you manage the complexity of, well, what should, let's say in this case, if it's a co-pilot or an AI agent, what is the agent allowed to access on behalf of me? And so I think there is also this notion of like, we have to be careful about things like data leakage, and making sure that the agents or the AI models only access the data that they are supposed to have, and not access things that they're not supposed to have, right? So like a classic example, imagine if you have an AI model running, let's just take the internal use case. Imagine the model now has access to everybody's pay information, right? Typically, you would control who has access to this type of information. But if the AI model actually has this information, somebody on my team or even someone like me can find out how someone else is getting paid, right? So that's very sensitive personal information that you don't want leaking. And so I think the implications of not getting this right are pretty significant. And so this is where I think everybody who's designing an application or anybody who's designing for this agent like behavior has to think about, well, what can this agent do on your behalf? And then where do you introduce a human in the loop, right? Like it could be that I've authorized an agent to go and shop for pillows from me, for example, if that's what I want the agent to do. Maybe there are thresholds, like if it's a transaction beyond a certain threshold, maybe I'd want to review that, right, and approve, just like we do sometimes when we're using banking applications. If you're transferring money, there's always like this second, there are additional factors, and then we also go ahead and there are additional approval workflows. So those are the types of things we now have to think about in this new world, and in a world that's actually moving really, really fast, right? I mean, you probably
Yeah.
read about a breakthrough almost every week. And so how do you keep up with all of that?
Yeah. So let's break this problem down into two.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the just existing attacks, acceleration of existing attacks, right? Like bots are a royal pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
And we've attempted to mitigate bots wherever we can for unauthorized signups and all the things that you try to do. Can we use artificial intelligence to actually help fight AI driven bots? Is there a solution there that's evolving that helps us be better detecting those bots and mitigating those kinds of attacks?
Yeah. So the good news is you can use machine learning and AI today to really get ahead of these threat actors. And so, for example, our machine learning models take in 70 to 100 different signals depending on the type of sort of authentication method that you're using, and we're constantly training those models to make sure we are aware of all new attack patterns, and so that we can stop those attacks from happening before you even notice them. And it's fairly common for products like ours and others too, that essentially will block a pretty significant amount of traffic on a daily basis that are these large scripted bots and bot attacks. So actually, our AI and machine learning is your friend, and you are able to mitigate these attacks. There are also other things we do within our product, which is because we have a massive customer install base, and we are fighting. We're doing billions of authentications per month, and we're blocking billions and billions of bots every single day. We see these patterns all the time throughout our entire install base, and so we can easily prevent big attacks from happening, because we are seeing these patterns happening throughout all the internet traffic that that we interact with on a daily basis. And so the benefit is, if we do see suspicious activity or suspicious behavior, we can do interesting things, like you can step up your authentication, right? Like, hey, looks like this specific login is coming from a suspicious IP, maybe suspicious location. We should add a step up factor. Or we could do we could do more drastic things, like we can automatically log you out of all of your logged in instances
Hmm.
and ask you to re-authenticate, right? And we can also do things like we can invalidate sessions, right? So we can selectively say, well, of all the active sessions you have, here are a few that look really, really suspicious. Let's go ahead and disable those. So machine learning helps significantly, and we've added all these specific features that allow our customers to set up the right thresholds that they want to
Mhm.
implement automatically. and or if they want to intervene manually, they can also do that.
But it's still a delicate balancing act, right? Because it goes back to that friction conversation we had at the
Yeah,
beginning, right? Is
yeah.
if you're too invasive in reauth or dropping sessions or whatever, it could create some friction. So you want to make sure you're balancing those kind of controls correctly.
Yes, yeah. The balance is really important, and it's especially in the scenarios of like addressing consumer identity, right?
Mhm.
You only want to introduce friction when it's necessary, because the flip side of it is pretty significant. So let's take just a few examples. We all buy online, right? So imagine if you are buying products online and there were so many friction points just to purchase a product. You're going to abandon and say, you know what, I'm going to go use some other brand or some other product. So it can really affect your conversions in a negative way. um, so in a consumer scenario, it's really delicate. You have to balance the right amount of security. You want to deliver convenience, because let's face it, every brand today, every retailer, every customer is in the business of giving these like amazing customer experiences that we've all come to know and love. And then you also want to balance things like, especially with customers or in different geos and jurisdictions, there's also this balance of privacy, right? How do you make sure that you're also upholding to all the privacy rules and regulations for the jurisdiction you're operating in? So it's a delicate balance, and we're constantly thinking about, well, how can we build products to make it easy for our customers to sort of manage that balance? And there could be some scenarios, like if you think of financial institutions, I think there, because it's your money that that's involved. Maybe a higher security standard and more friction is okay, right? So there are scenarios where maybe that's okay, um, but increasingly, more and more and more brands are trying to sort of make sure that they're giving you the best experience, that you get the best value once you log in, and you're able to either consume their content or subscription, or in the case of retailers, you're trying to buy a product and check out as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yep. I'm fine with additional enforcement around my bank accounts. I'm good with that. But yeah,
Absolutely,
I'm with
yeah.
you on that one. All right. So let's talk about the second part of the problem that you brought up,
Yeah.
which is these AI agents, these co-pilots, right? I assume they all need to have some sort of identity and access control around them. So how do we start thinking about, for a long time, it was just people, it was just humans. Now we have service accounts, machine accounts. I assume this means we now have AI agent or co-pilot accounts that now have to be managed along with all the other identities in an application, right? Because
Yeah.
you have to be able to restrict what they have access to, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. So there are several. Let's talk about maybe like what are the different use cases in this new with this rise of generative AI applications. So let's talk about authentication and authorization for Gen AI apps. So first is basics, right? An agent ultimately also needs to have an identity, right? And so agents need a way to authenticate, and they need a way to authenticate on your behalf. And so that's one use case, which is we need to kind of treat agents like what they are. They're basically designated to work on my behalf, and so you have to figure out how to authenticate agents in a safe and secure way. Then the second use case is, well, you want to be able to call APIs on users' behalf, right? So if you basically want to securely get API tokens for things like maybe Google or GitHub, or you want the agent to manage tasks like, let's say, calendar events, could be your to-do list. In the case of an engineer, it could be different code repos, or really any web API interface. You want to be able to call those APIs on the user's behalf. Then the third one tends to be, kind of authorization for RAG, and what I mean by that is all of these applications today have a base model, but then they're adding very specific data or documents, right, to improve the model. And so this is where I was talking about, you need to make sure that these models can only access data that they're supposed to access on your behalf. And so making sure there is no leakage, or the models having access to information that they're not supposed to have, because that can be exposed in not so good ways. And then the last thing would be, well, we all love like all these agents doing work on our behalf. They're autonomous, they're async, all of that is great. But in the example that I shared earlier, that maybe there are certain things we want a human to be available and verify that, yes, this is exactly what I wanted the agent to do. So this usually is in when it comes to transactions, or maybe thresholds for how much an agent can spend on your behalf. So you can see, like, these are kind of the four different areas that generative AI apps are evolving to. And so we think about, okay, well, how can we provide capabilities so that our customers and the developers who are building these experiences can safely do so. And so we have capabilities that help customers authenticate users or authenticate agents in this case, right? Even if it's machine to machine, we have a capability that helps customers do that. We can enable then those apps or the agents call any web API and do so in a secure way, making sure that tokens are exchanged securely. And then we do have a product that we launched recently called fine grain authorization, which really allows our customers to model relationships between what a user or different entities can do. And this is where they're really fine grained permission, and we do these checks in near real time to make sure that if you in fact can access a specific data point, or that you have permissions to do specific tasks. And then the last part is, we've been supporting a lot of industry standards, and some of this you see today in the financial services industry, which is fairly common, that for certain transactions you're going to have to verify. Yeah, there is a human in the loop that has to do additional steps. And so we are bringing that same concept here to our customers and developers who are building this application, so that they can set up this async human in the loop at any point in the app experience or the customer journey that they're deploying. So those are the kind of different use cases and how we think about solving for them.
Now, how much control does the consumer have in being able to, control what the agent has access to, what data, which tasks, et cetera, right? Because that's got to be the other challenge is it's
Yes.
not just the consumer, the agent having full access. Like sometimes the consumer may want to say, well, no, I only want the agent to do these
Yeah.
tasks, or have access to this data. Can you now give the consumer the ability to change the granularity of the agent itself?
Yeah. So what our product allows is allows our customers to is they can set those parameters, right? So um today the way this is done is, we all know, like, whenever we go to these websites, you're always signing up for terms and conditions, and you're giving consent, right? So you're always like, enable,
Right.
you're giving permission to the website or the browser to allow them to do things like personalization and stuff like that. So I think what we're going to see an evolution in two places. One, obviously, in this more explicit way to get consent of what the agent can do on your behalf. And I think we're also going to see a pattern where different brands or products have an explicit, just like, we all access like a user profile page, right? You have your preferences set
Mhm.
up. You're going to have those types of experiences where explicitly brands or our customers will give their consumers a choice. Hey, here are all the things agents can do on my behalf, and here are all the things that they cannot. And so we will see more granular permissioning happening, and more active, like deliberate consenting or getting consent from consumers so that you can do things on their behalf. So, and we obviously our product allows you to do basic consent out of the box. We also partner with others who have deep expertise in consent, and then we also have provide all the building blocks so that if our customer decides to say, well, I actually want to expose a page on my website or in my application where the consumers can see all the things they can and cannot do, we make it super easy for our customers to include those experiences. So those are the two areas where we're enabling our customers to sort of make sure that their consumers are aware for what the agents can do.
Yeah, I mean, as a product guy, right, building product in this
Yeah.
space, I always think about, you know, off by default, force the user to enable it so they understand that they're actually turning this functionality on. But, you know, I haven't seen the ability to do the more granular control yet, which is why I'm asking these questions, because I think
Yeah.
as regulations around AI continue to evolve, especially in Europe because of the stricter privacy policies, not giving customers the ability to really control what these agents and can do is going to be, I think, a challenge on the consumer side, especially in Europe initially,
Yeah.
and then probably California, New York, and a few other states here in the US.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you know, you're seeing this, like, the capabilities are evolving rapidly, and I'm not sure regulation is keeping up with it. And this is not to say like we need to highly regulate everything, but these capabilities are changing really, really rapidly, and not all of it is bad, by the way, right? I mean, I think we would all appreciate if we had agents that were acting on our behalf in safe ways and making our lives more productive. I do think consumers, a lot of consumers, would love that, but the capabilities are changing really, really fast, and you know, regulation isn't always keeping up, and so we are kind of leaving up to our customers to figure some of this stuff out. And it is challenging, right? Because the space is moving fast. There is so much data out there already, and you know, these bots and agents already have access to so much information. So how do you make sure you're delivering these amazing consumer experiences and capabilities, but also making sure that nothing bad happens as a result of that? And so it's a delicate balance. But we're trying to do our part, which is try to give our customers as many tools as possible so they can do this in a in a safe and seamless way.
Yeah. So if your customers are looking to implement this more granular control around AI access, is it just the consumer cloud identity product from Okta that has all this capabilities kind of built into it? Is that kind of their source of where they should go look?
Yes, yeah. We have two products: the customer identity cloud, or the product that's Auth0. If you go to auth0.com, you can use that to do all the requirements you have around authentication. So everything I was talking about, agent authentication on behalf of, and things like async human in the loop can be done with that product. And then earlier this year, we launched a product called Okta FGA, or fine grain authorization. That product is very specifically designed to do these really, really granular permissioning, but at massive scale. And so because remember, a lot of our customers, they have millions of consumers who are on their platform, and with this explosion of agents, now they're going to have those millions of consumers are going to have potentially millions of agents working on their behalf. So you need a product that can make near real-time decisions at massive scale for every single transaction those consumers are making, or every single transaction that the consumers' agents are doing on their behalf. So it's a pretty complex problem, not only from a permissions perspective, but how do you do this at scale, whilst delivering the experience of, you know, low latency, and also making sure that it's secure, that you in fact have access to perform this task, or whatever it is that your agent is doing. So those are the two products that work in concert to deliver on the 4 use cases that I walked you through earlier.
Awesome. Shiv, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
To learn how to protect customer identity, please visit securityweekly.com/Okta. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.